So I've noticed that Microsoft has been getting questioned quite a bit over the last couple of months, especially from Xbox fans or commentators with podcasts and stuff right now online. There seems to be some concern, maybe some wondering about Microsoft's dedication even to the Xbox hardware, and if they would maybe be leaving the hardware game, or at least stepping away from it here in the not too distant future. And we have some recent stories that have come out that continue to kind of lean into the idea of Microsoft going, we'll say, third party, or at least exploring that avenue. And I wanted to go over that here today because for an industry that's become so used to the traditional console exclusive, things are about to get weird. So if you guys enjoy this video, make sure to hit that like button. Subscribe if you're new here to the Spawn Wave channel. I do want to start off by mentioning that Nate has been making the rounds a lot online with different news cycles. He has done a couple of podcasts. He did Nate the Hate, which is the one that's getting a lot of discussion. And then he also did Direct Xbox, which, good news with Direct Xbox, it seems that Hellblade 2 is doing pretty well in development currently. And if you want to hear more about that, check that out. It's over on the Spawncast YouTube account, spawncastnetwork.com. But Hellblade 2, I think it's going to turn out to be pretty good. However, Nate also discussed two things that we can expect this year, actually, from Xbox. One, I think, is a great move, and that has to do with the backwards compatibility program making a return. And I feel like this makes a ton of sense, and we all look at that and go, okay, yeah, obviously they're going to do that, because they now own Activision Blizzard. And if you're unaware, Microsoft has already seen great success from the backwards compatibility program and Activision without owning them. And this happened back in 2018. So we get the NPD sales charts every month, right? Tells us how video games sell in the US, broken down with like a top 20 chart. And at that time, if we jump over here, we can see the top 20 games, right? And we can look down to number 8. That's Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2. That's not a like how we have Modern Warfare now. It's nothing like that. That's Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2 from 2009, the Xbox 360 version. See, the way the MPD tracks sales, it's all revenue based. So this was made backwards compatible, and it also went up for sale digitally on the Xbox storefront. So people were paying like 15 or 20 bucks or something, I think, for it. And there was enough money that was accrued that jumped it ahead of Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, Mario Odyssey, Minecraft, and just below God of War. And that's an Xbox 360 game that was going for about a third of the price of these other like $60 games, right? So that's very, very impressive. It also brought a lot of interest to Microsoft's Xbox platform because that's where you can play it. You couldn't play it on PlayStation because they don't have the ability to go back to the PlayStation 3 unless you go through streaming. And let's face it, Call of Duty and streaming, it's not great. The idea of being able to pop in your copy of Modern Warfare 2 and it loads up, or you hit a few buttons and you now own it and can play it, that's a pretty appealing prospect. And since then, we've had more and more of these Call of Duty games going backwards compatible. And we even got to a point where Microsoft and Activision apparently came together and fixed the servers. Like, there was discussion as to who exactly did it. The point is, they all work really well online currently. And it is a reason to have an Xbox if you're a big fan of the older Call of Duty games. And it sets up Microsoft beautifully with the idea of these Call of Duty games are now in Game Pass. I think that would make that'd make people very, very interested in the service then. If you pay a monthly fee and you have access to all these legacy games, you don't even necessarily need the brand new one just yet in the next year or two. If you load up with all those older Call of Duties that do work online, I think for people who are big Call of Duty fans, that might be enough at least to get them started. And then, of course, they can look forward to the future when these other Call of Duty games, the new ones, drop into Game Pass day one. Now, because Microsoft currently owns Activision Blizzard, they, of course, can tap a number of different games. Now, there is a large list of Activision Blizzard published games. There's only one issue. Many of these games are licensed, which people are realizing as they go through. They're like, that'd be cool. Oh, wait, okay. There's a third party involved with that one that they'd have to discuss it with. Oh, okay, yeah, and more licensing. Not all of them, but enough. I mean, really, they can go back and grab all these different Crash Bandicoot games, drop them in. Great. Older Spyro games, there you go. But when you start looking up and down at the list and you start to realize that Activision Blizzard did a lot of work, for example, with Marvel, and there's a bunch of Spider-Man games in here, you go, okay, well, could they negotiate with Marvel and have these Spider-Man games go backwards compatible and even drop into Game Pass? I mean, maybe. That is something I'm curious about with Sony, is what the contract they have right now with Marvel around some of these Spider-Man games that are going on the PS5. Are those new Spider-Man games? And since these are already published by Activision, would those be exempt from the idea of a brand new Spider-Man game because technically it's been out? That is a question that I think a lot of us have because, let's face it, if Spider-Man 2, 3, Edge of Time, Friend or Foe, Shattered Dimensions, Web of Shadows, all just drop into Game Pass over the course, we'll say, of a year, and it takes advantage of higher frame rate with FPS boost. You have auto HDR, maybe some kind of resolution bump to look better on modern displays. That would be really, really exciting to have that kind of announcement. You can also have like Quake 4. That'd be pretty cool, but you can kind of see the issue as we go up and down the list here. It is a lot of license. Like, you're not going to get, I hate to say, you're not going to get any of these Tony Hawk games in there. There's likenesses. There's obviously the music, which apparently is the biggest issue, by the way, is the music in a lot of these games. It's just difficult to make that happen. We have heard from Hasbro that Transformers, they're all for it, and I think that would be awesome because a couple of these you just can't get anymore. Like, they've been delisted. Like, I think War for Cybertron is a big one, right? Fall of Cybertron. These are games that you just cannot get. So you bring these back, and then all of a sudden you also have online play enabled. And oh yeah, they're also in Game Pass. That's a big theme. Put them into Game Pass. I'd be all for that. That would be awesome to see that happen. Otherwise, though, the list, it's substantial. Unfortunately, they would have to cherry pick quite a bit. What if they got Futurama? Wouldn't that be amazing if they made that happen? That's another one it's pretty rare. So outside of the backwards compatibility sector that I think we can all agree makes sense, and I'm kind of expecting them to make a grand announcement about it, probably with some games that they would be ready to show off and then drop in the Game Pass. That's probably coming up in 3 or 4 months. Like, maybe around when we normally have E3 time, if Microsoft would still want to do a big presentation, I would look towards that. That's something Nate's also mentioned, and I believe he's correct. So it's, I think, a good thing to bring that backwards compatibility program back up and continue on that path, because it's pretty cool to have that. It makes for some nice surprises, and yes, it plays into our nostalgia, but it would work to beef up this subscription service that Microsoft is really trying to add value to. Now, the other part, and the thing that's really gained a lot of discussion online, is once again the idea of Microsoft exploring the gaming industry from a third-party lens, as in they would work to publish games on other platforms, so PlayStation and Nintendo. All right, so with that in mind, it does appear that one game that is critically acclaimed, coming from Microsoft, first party, would be making its way to other platforms this year. There have been some guesses, and I also have a guess for it. Now, this is once again coming from Nate, and I think he's correct on this too. And it's going to be interesting because I think it's a strategy that Microsoft can work with, and Nate brings this up in that you can introduce potentially a new audience to this intellectual property, and then when it's time to make the sequel, you specifically have it on a platform that you want to drive interest to, all right? Because people would then know about this IP from their Nintendo system or their PlayStation, but then they go, oh, okay, the sequel's on Game Pass on PC or Xbox. I got to go there. So the game I think that we could probably expect, I'm going to say, going to other platforms this year is Hi-Fi Rush. That's going to be my assumption. I think it makes a ton of sense to put it on a Nintendo system. I think it would do really well there, and also on PlayStation. So Microsoft would make quite a bit of money, I feel like, from the software perspective of we're just going to sell this to a bunch of people. And Satya Nadella has mentioned during that FTC hearing, he just doesn't get it. Why do we have to keep this to one platform? Can't we sell this to other people? But because that's sort of the precedent and the idea that's been set since the start of consoles, really, with Nintendo and then eventually, of course, Sony showing up and really pushing the console exclusivity factor, they have to play within those rules that have been set. So the fact that Satya Nadella has no interest in this kind of stuff also means that he'd probably be more than happy to say, greenlight this along with Phil, be like, yeah, let's do it. Let's get this game out to more people. And then, yeah, probably reel them back in when the sequel is only on Xbox and PC. They're just like discussing it on places like X or different forums. There's some concern that Microsoft might kind of back away from hardware a bit. Like, if they get Game Pass to a certain number and it doesn't feel like they have to heavily rely on the console to get it to that point, would they say, you know what, we're just going to go all software, we're R&Ding these systems that just aren't selling as well as we'd like? Maybe, but I still think that hardware right now for Microsoft is their like true connection, especially from the entertainment side, to the consumer. Otherwise, if you look at Microsoft from top to bottom, it's a lot of enterprise, it's a lot of corporate connections. I mean, they do Office and Windows, and it's not really like, oh yeah, that's I know that from my entertainment center in my living room. Now, that's where the Xbox fits in nicely for Microsoft. So I feel like even if they weren't selling crazy amounts of systems, and even if they don't get to what the Xbox One did, which was roughly 55 or so million systems, and I gotta say, I don't think it's as clear cut that they're gonna make it there. They might come up short of the Xbox One, which is wild to think considering the start that the Xbox One had, really in the minds of consumers and how it was viewed after Don Matrick has his way with it. But that would be interesting. But Microsoft does seem to be taking the focus off of needing an Xbox to play these games when you can play it through the cloud on PC. And again, depending on how this little experiment, I think, goes with some of these games coming up, maybe you can just play them on PlayStation and you can play them on Nintendo system as well. I mean, Call of Duty is going to be on all these different platforms. Minecraft has been consistent kind of going that path, and I think it's just going to continue with some of their other big games. I will say, though, I feel like it makes sense for Microsoft to really push their hardware more, because if you have an Xbox, you're probably getting Game Pass. Like, I feel like the attach rate there is significant, and they would have the numbers, and I feel like they should see that, well, we have a Game Pass button at the top. It's advertised all over the box that they buy when they get the Xbox, and then when you have it on, you'll still just sometimes get ads for Game Pass. So it's odd to me that they're not making a bigger push for Xbox first, but Microsoft is right now all about Game Pass first. Play your games wherever you want, on whatever you want, as long as you're signed up to Game Pass, which we haven't had a number necessarily released recently, like an updated one. So I will be curious how they're going to approach that, because I feel like they're going to fudge the number somewhat since they took Xbox Live members and merged them in with Game Pass Core. And I think they're going to flash some big 60 to 70 million number, but it's going to be like, okay, how many of those are actually Game Pass and how many of those got merged in? But nonetheless, the idea is to pump up the subscription numbers, and I guess that's technically what it would have done. And maybe it is just because a lot of us who've been around doing gaming for a while are just used to the idea of console exclusives and that selling hardware, which is supposed to be, to our understanding, the number one thing that these companies push. But things are going to get kind of weird, as I mentioned, going forward here. And maybe that's why it's still kind of sinking in, or people are still trying to wrap their mind around this, because it's just not something we've ever really seen from a platform holder. Oh, and don't forget, it's not necessarily just Microsoft finding themselves in this situation looking for more people to experience and buy their games. Sony kind of on the same path, just maybe a little slower, maybe taking a side detour right now with PC and cell phones. I don't know if Sony will get to a position where they're like, we gotta put stuff on Xbox or Nintendo necessarily, but they're certainly looking around at platforms outside of PlayStation, and a lot of this just comes back to budgets, how much these games cost to make, and needing to find more customers. Oh, and the need, of course, for infinite growth as a publicly traded company with investors. But hey, even if you're questioning Microsoft's dedication to hardware, one thing's for sure, they're definitely in it for gaming after spending $70 billion on Activision Blizzard, and with rumors that they're looking to start the next generation in 2026, seems like they at least have some kind of plans for new hardware. So we'll see as this generation ends and we go into the new one what exactly Microsoft has planned. But let me know what you guys think about this one down below, with Microsoft seemingly set to have the backwards compatibility program return, and even their push for some of their more critically acclaimed titles maybe heading to other platforms to draw up some interest for the brand. Thanks guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.